So this is the new Wahoo KICKR Bike Pro. So what they've done here is take their most recent KICKR Bike 2 and add in-game controls directly into the shift levers themselves. So now you'll be able to control cycling apps like Zwift directly from your handlebars. But not only that, they've also added some premium touches all around, like an actual good saddle. Imagine that. And the Pro name is kind of interesting, where this is actually going to be replacing the existing KICKR Bike 2. So now you're going to have the KICKR Bike Pro as the flagship offering, and then the KICKR Bike Shift as the more budget-friendly offering. And this actually makes a ton of sense, because before it was like you had the KICKR Bike as the top-end option, and then the KICKR Bike Shift, which was the more budget-friendly offering. It was a little bit confusing, like which one was which. Now it's going to be Pro and Shift, which makes a lot more sense. Oh, and the KICKR Bike Pro isn't the only new thing that Wahoo's announcing today. So they're also announcing their new Core 2 smart bike trainer, and this actually has a lot of upgrades, and I'll have another video that will be coming up in like a day or two, so stay tuned for that. And then for price, so the KICKR Bike Pro is going to come in at $100 more than the previous KICKR Bike 2, so $39.99 versus $38.99. And to be honest with you, with the whole state of the economy nowadays, I'm actually surprised that it's not more. Okay, so let's first talk about what's the same on this versus the previous generation. So just like before, this is basically the most interactive and immersive smart bike that you can get, having an all-in-one, ready-to-go solution for riding indoors anytime you like. And the advantage of being a dedicated smart bike is that this can accommodate multiple riders in a household, where this has an immense amount of options when it comes to fit, where it can fit riders anywhere from 5 feet tall or 152 centimeters all the way up to 6'4" or 193 centimeters. And the adjustments are quick to do as well, where you can adjust the height of the entire bike. You can adjust the seat post height, fore and aft in the saddle, as well as top tube length on both sides, as well as stem height and reach. And there's markings all over the components too, so people can easily switch back and forth, and they also have a nice handy fit guide within the app. And then in addition to that, this also has a bear claw style adjustable crank with crank lengths from 165 millimeters all the way up to 175. So tons of adjustments here. And then when it comes to the interactive part of it, so this is probably one of the most interactive experiences that you get when it comes to a smart bike, where the frame itself has built-in incline simulation where it can replicate hills and descents in games like Zwift, and not only for the automatic resistance from the flywheel, but the actual incline where the entire bike will tilt based on the terrain in the game. And with the particular kind of flywheel resistance they have in the KICKR Bike Pro, so this is a belt-driven electromagnetic motor, and what that means is that this can not only provide resistance to simulate hills, but it also can simulate descents, where the motor can actually drive forward during descents to add a little bit more realism. Now on the control side of things, so this is arguably where they made the bigger upgrades with this Pro model, where the shift levers and brake levers right here, so these pretty much remain the same, where the shifting, so this provides virtual shifting in games like Zwift, and you can also choose between Shimano or Axis style shifting depending on your preference. But it's really more on the top of the levers here where they made the bigger changes, where these now have in-game controls for stuff like Zwift, where you can navigate through menus and stuff like that. So these work just like Zwift's own controllers, like their Play controllers or their new Click 2s. So you can use these before your ride for navigating throughout the screens, and then in the ride you can also bring up the action bar and then drop ride-on bombs and stuff like that. And these controls also pair up just like Zwift's own controls, where all you do is just basically go into the controls menu when you actually are pairing up your devices. And in addition to power and resistance, you also pair up the KICKR Bike Pro as controls. And along with the navigation controls that you get on the tops here, so there's also little buttons inside the levers for steering. But another part of these upgrades is that there's now more premium soft goods, like there's now a Physique saddle, which has a nice relief area here. And then there's also Physique handlebar tape, as well as a new handlebar here that they say is optimized for indoor cycling. But from what I can tell, basically it has a little bit more flat area on the tops here, and then there's a little bit more flare on the bars. And this bar, by the way, is around 40 centimeters wide, and there's a 16 millimeter flare. And I definitely think these are nice touches, considering this is a $4,000 bike, where they're not just using any old saddle or any old handlebar or any old tape. And then for some other bits here, so for connectivity, you can connect this via Bluetooth, ANT+, Wi-Fi, and even Ethernet if you have their Direct Connect accessory. And this has a max resistance of 2,500 watts, which basically none of us need. And then there's also a race mode here where it can report instant power to your cycling app, which can be important for those race sprints. And since this is a full-on smart bike, so this isn't going to be delivered by your regular UPS or Amazon driver. So this is going to be delivered via a special freight service, and they'll bring it inside your house, but they won't assemble it. But assembly took me 30 or so minutes, so it's really not that big a deal. Now, they do recommend, however, that you do have another person help you during the setup process, but I've actually assembled a few of these by now, and I've been able to manage, but just be careful if you decide to do it yourself. One sort of random and crazy thing I wanted to mention is that this comes in a large and heavy box. I was expecting 2 people to be carrying it in on a dolly or something like that. Well, the guy that brought this in, well, he definitely ate his Wheaties, because he literally carried into my house on his shoulder like a boombox. Now, when it comes to sound, so this is the same as this before, where this isn't actually completely silent, where it has a slight whirring sound to it since it has a built-in motor drive. So there's going to be like a slight hum when you're riding it, but the sound doesn't really change all that much with varying speeds like can happen on some direct drive bike trainers. So the sound is basically going to be the same however you're riding it, so I wouldn't necessarily call it 100% quiet, but you could definitely ride this thing with like a baby sleeping in the next room. However, one issue I had with the original KICKR bike is that it made a little bit of a ruckus with some creaking around the seat tube area somewhere, especially when I was standing. Now this one has remained quiet for the most part, but I do hear some like creaking every so often from the seat tube area. But again, I've only had this for a few weeks, so I'll have to follow up with that a little bit later on the road to see how that goes. And then when it comes to power accuracy, so just like the previous generation, this has a claimed plus or minus 1% power accuracy, and there's also auto calibration, so there's no actual manual process you have to do to calibrate it. And for my testing so far, it's very close to a pair of Favero Asioma pedals within just a couple watts, so that's definitely in the range of accuracy, but it's kind of interesting where it's actually reading a couple watts higher than the pedals, which is usually the other way around, where pedals should generally be ever so slightly higher than a trainer, as the pedals are the first point in contact where it has the most direct power. And the flywheel on the trainer is farther down the drivetrain where there can be drivetrain loss. And it's not like anything way out of line or anything like that, and I'm sort of nitpicking, but it's totally fine. Oh, and then I also did some follow-up tests using Garmin's new Rally XC210s, which have proven to be pretty accurate pedals. And again, the power's really close to those pedals as well, but again, just a couple watts higher than what I would expect. So that does seem to be consistent across pedals. And what I've noticed is that there are certain points where it is reporting a few watts higher than the pedals, but it's also hanging on to power for about a second longer after I stop pedaling. But what's kind of even more interesting is that these are sort of the same results that I've had on pretty much every Wahoo trainer, regardless of whether it's a smart bike or a trainer over the last 2 years. So it definitely has remained consistent. Oh, and then one more thing is that the KICKR Bike Pro can also now act as a sensor bridge. So what you can do is pair your heart rate monitor to the KICKR Bike Pro, and then the KICKR Bike Pro will actually transmit that data to your cycling app, which will basically free up one Bluetooth connection. These are nice updates all around, and I actually appreciate that new Pro name where there's now a nice separation between Pro and Shift, where you kind of like know which one's which. Anyhow, this is just my initial review of the new KICKR Bike Pro, but I'm gonna have some more long-term thoughts on this after a bit more time with it this season, so make sure to subscribe to the channel, get a notification when that video comes out, and also make sure to check out my new KICKR Core 2 video, which I'll have coming out like in a day or two after this one. But in the meantime, happy riding, and we will see you in the next video.